Well, good afternoon. Love to see all of you, even if we're on a Zoom. If you have cameras, I would love to see your faces if you're not in your PJs, just so I can at least see your eyeballs. I do like that interaction a little bit. And I promised Dave yesterday that I would make him proud for letting me come on and talk to all you lovely folks. So I'm just going to turn on my fire hose and start firing. Fair enough? So here we go. For those of you I haven't had the pleasure to meet, my name is Karyn Jensen, as Dave said, and I'm the founder and president of HRC. We are a full service human resource consulting firm, and we've been doing business in this area for 17 years this year, which I cannot believe. I'm blown away by that. I've been doing HR since I was 2. No, I'm just kidding, but very, very long time, longer than I want to admit. Hopefully you were able to print the PowerPoint or the handouts that Dave sent out, because there's a little pre-test in there, and then there's little blocks where you can put notes, because like I said, I'm going to fire hose you. I have an hour, so I'm going to take every second as we go. As far as questions, because I know that you're going to have some, if you don't mind putting them in the chat, and at the very end, I will hopefully go through all the questions that you have. And Taylor Bauer, she works on my team. Hi, Tay, thanks for having my back here. She'll be reading the questions, and I'll be answering them. And if I don't know, of course, I'll say, I don't know, but we'll find out for you. I just want to make sure that we get through all the 10 points that I have to share with you. So before we begin, the top 10 mistakes business owners make with regards to their HR function, I want to tell you what the most important issue is for businesses. And that is, and if you did just this, you would stay out of so many troubles with your people. And it's simple. You simply need to have some conversations. There are so many employee relations issues, unemployment hearings, Nevada Equal Rights Commission lawsuits that I have been involved with, that if people had just had a conversation, if it had just occurred, if the manager had listened to understand, and then asked questions, and then validated feelings, and then went to problem solving, or more simply, even talk to their people to know their issues and their challenges and their insecurities and their worries. If they had done that, a lot of these issues that companies are in would not even take place. But what managers say to me and business leaders, unfortunately, is, Karyn, I just don't have time for that. And folks, I'm here to tell you that you don't have time to not have time. And you're either going to pay now, pay later. And if you pay later, you're going to pay more later in morale, in turnover, and in lawsuits. So with that said, I'm going to use David Letterman's top 10 mistakes, and I'm going to drop us down to the number one mistake business owners make with their humans, right? And I want to tell you that this is the nuts and bolts part of HR. This is the transactional issues. However, the transactional issues, either if you're doing them right, are either going to bring trust in your organization or they're going to kill it. So it's not just about paperwork. I want to say that. So after today, if you are able to implement some of the things that I talk about, you're going to build a more solid foundation at your company. Your people are going to trust you more. They're going to be less likely to sue you. And most importantly, they're going to stay working for you for a longer period of time. So hopefully you'll find that of value. How does that sound? Can I get a thumbs up? See that you're all out there? All right, right on. Let's go to number 10. So number 10 is stay current on laws that apply to your size business. So do you know what legislation applies to your company? Because it basically matters about your size, how many employees you have. And employment law can be totally overwhelming. I mean, I've been doing this, I told you, since I was 2, and I get overwhelmed and stumped every day. And this is what I do for a living. So if it's not what you do for a living, it's really important that you have a designated point person at your company that does know what they're doing with regards to employment laws. Not only from the knowledge standpoint, but also from confidentiality and consistency, so that everybody has a point person and that things are administered consistently, and that there's one person that knows all, and it's not, common knowledge that something's going on inside your organization, which really causes havoc. And if you have to train somebody, send them to the SHRM conference, send them to UNR's continuing ed, human resources courses. I teach a few of those courses, and it is phenomenal, that certificate program. Get an employment law attorney on speed dial, get HRC on speed dial. There's HR magazines that people can read. Educate your person. Okay, so this is why I'm going to do a quick, like down and dirty of the 6 main federal laws, starting with the ADA. That has to do, if you have 15 or more employees, this law applies to you. You can't discriminate against somebody that's a qualified individual who has a disability and meets the mandatory requirements of the job. It also says that if you have an employee that has a disability, you have to provide reasonable accommodation. Then we have FMLA, which applies to employers with 50 or more employees, part-time and full-time, within a 75-mile radius, 12 weeks of job-protected unpaid leave. It's like a bank of unpaid leave that people can use for the birth, adoption, foster care of their babies, illness of a family member, illness of themselves. Then we have ADEA, which applies to employers that have 20 or more employees, and says you can't discriminate against those that are 40 and above. Now, a lot of people ask me, well, what if I'm younger than 40? Can they discriminate against you? Yes, so far, but tomorrow there will probably be a new law to protect you. Then there is Title VII of the Civil Rights Act. Now, this is the most litigated because it has the most areas of coverage: race, color, national origin, gender, disability, sexual orientation, and sexual preference. The last 2 are Nevada law. So it was a federal law, but Nevada added the last 2. And then, of course, there's OSHA. And if you weren't familiar with OSHA before COVID, I am sure you are now. If you have, I saw you, Megan. If you have 11 or more employees, you must have a written workplace safety program that includes monthly safety meetings. And if you have 25 or more employees, you have to have your safety meetings documented and ready to show OSHA if they walk in. Okay, so that was a down and dirty of the law, the federal laws that apply, the biggies, okay? So let's look at number 9. And remember, if you want to ask a question, put it in the chat, and it'll be out of order from our presentation, but I can handle that, and so can you all. So we're going to go to number 9, Taylor. Okay, so we're going to ensure correct classification with regards to FLSA. That was easy for me to say. FLSA is the 6th federal law I want to talk about, Fair Labor Standards Act. So this has to do with minimum wage and appropriate classification of your employees, whether they're exempt or non-exempt. So exempt means they do not get overtime. That's a salaried individual. Non-exempt means they get overtime. Those are hourly individuals. Now, the common mistake here, and again, that's what we're talking about in my 20 plus years of HR. These are things that I see all the time. So one of them is that people misclassify their employees. Sometimes they do it to avoid overtime because they think that it's no big deal. It's a huge deal to the Department of Labor. If somebody's misclassified as exempt, you haven't paid them overtime, you haven't given them breaks or lunches, they can literally write down on a napkin the amount of times you didn't pay them. And then you're going to back pay them, and you're going to pay fines. So misclassifying and not paying overtime is a terrible idea. If you're unsure, have an audit done. For non-exempt employees, it's important. I think we all know this, but sometimes I run into this. If somebody works overtime, you have to pay them that overtime. You can't say, well, it was not authorized, so I'm not paying you. You need to pay it. You can discipline them because it's basically stealing from you, right? So you can discipline them, but you have to pay them. And please make sure they take their 2 10-minute breaks and their half an hour lunch. That is Nevada state law. Federal is totally different, but Nevada says 2 10s and 1 half an hour. Here's another area where employers make a big boo-boo, and that is that, and I'm not kidding you, I answer this question, Taylor, don't you agree with me, probably 2 or 3 times a week. Can't I just make that person an independent contractor, right? Why do you want to do that? Because you don't have to pay workers' comp, you don't have to pay unemployment, you don't have Social Security, blah, blah, blah. But here's the thing. There is criteria that people need to meet in order to be deemed an independent contractor. For example, they have to have their own workers' comp. They have to have a business license. They have to use their own tools. They get to make their own rules as to when they're working. I am an independent contractor. Kevin Sicati is an independent contractor. Your employee that you're telling to come to work at this time to this time, and you're supplying their workers' comp, blah, 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 that person is not an independent contractor. Okay, so the most concerning of all those laws is Fair Labor Standards Act, because it's super easy for people to file a claim with the Department of Labor. OSHA, especially now because of COVID, they are out and about. You don't have your written workplace safety program put together. You need to get on it. Do not put that off anymore. And then IRCA compliance, which has to do with I-9s, which we will talk about because it's one of our top 10. All right, number 8. I told you it's going to be fire hose. If you, I want to tell you that if you write anything down today, I am offering a complimentary hour where you and I can talk about areas where you believe that you are having some issues and you need some guidance. Okay, and again, put questions in the chat. I know I'm going fire hose. I always fire hose. I just get to use the excuse of a time constraint right now. All right, number 8, create a step-by-step procedure manual plus all the accompanying forms. So here's the thing, I said in the beginning, HR is more than paperwork. Everyone classifies us as like paper pushers. And yeah, we do push paper, but let me tell you, how you handle transactions with your procedures and the appropriate forms with your folks either builds trust with them or kills trust with them. Because if you're building trust, then they're not going to, if they trust you with whatever transaction, then they're not going to do research on what they think you're doing wrong. And it is out there, right? They can just Google Department of Labor, Fair Labor Standards Act, non-exempt employees, overtime pay. And if you have good procedures and forms, that brings consistency. So everyone gets the same thing with regards to your hires, your terminations, your progressive discipline, your verifications, your benefits, FMLA and ADA administration, workers' comp administration. Consistency breeds efficiency. And one more thing about procedures, lots of times, terms, new hires, it's always in a hurry. If you have everything, all your ducks in a row, then it will ensure that nothing is missed. Because when things are missed, also, that brings us problems within our company. Okay, number 7 mistake that business owners make with regards to their people is they don't maintain proper HR files. I mean, Taylor, another one, she could tell me, we go into employers and, this is what we see typically. We see manila, and don't feel bad if this is you, because this is almost 10 out of 10. Manila folders with loose leaf papers, nothing organized, nothing's in date order. It's all just sort of a mess. And if you take the file out and you dropped it, everything would go everywhere. I encourage you to get 3-tab file folders where there's fasteners and everything that's in date order. And this is why. If you get sued or you have some sort of lawsuit or you have OSHA come in or IRCA come in, you show up in a suit as opposed to a pair of sweats with a properly organized file. Now, people ask me a lot, well, what about electronic? The problem with electronic is you start scanning everything in, you don't finish, not everything can be scanned. If they're going to come in, they want a paper document, they don't want to go in your electronic files. So that's the downside of electronics. I'm just going to throw that out there. Here's another mistake or issue that comes up is that people have so many, they have a form for this and a form for that. And when we go in and we do HR assessments where we look at your HR department from A to Z, people give us a pile of forms. And then they wonder why their managers don't know which forms to use when, because there's 30 of them and they're working managers. And then they have to go on this internet and find the form. And they really don't know in the first place what form to use. We encourage you to use a one-stop shop form, like an employee change form, that's what we call ours, or a personnel action form where new hires, change of address, change of pay, demotion, title change, termination, leaves of absence, it's all on one form. I do vacation separate, but everything else is on that employee change form. It makes it so much easier for your managers to be efficient. And by the way, with regards to your files, your medical information, workers' comp, FMLA, ADA, drug testing, that all needs to be kept separate in a locked cabinet away from your HR files. And your I-9 should be kept in, the IRCA I-9 form, which we're going to talk about, like I said, is also kept in a separate file from everything else. One last thing I want to talk about as far as forms. When's the last time you had somebody look at your employment application? There's been recent changes in California and Nevada. California says you cannot ask about criminal convictions anymore, and you can't ask about salary history. Nevada is only doing the salary history so far. It's probably going to come down the pipe that we can't ask about criminal background as well. So have somebody, employment law attorney. I have a few that I really recommend. If you need a resource, you let me know. Okay, and then lastly, control access to your HR files. Don't just allow anyone to go into your files. Now, there is people, HR people that are like this with them. People need to see them for performance management. Have out cards that, you know, Joe Smith took out Sally Sue's file, and then allow them to look at the file within the HR office to make their notes. That's okay, all right? As long as the medical is pulled out and the I-9s are pulled out. All right, number 6. Am I going too fast or are you guys good? Give me a thumbs up. Okay, all right. Number 6, make sure you out process, which is terminating, your employees carefully. So my number one advice here that I see the mistake that is made is either HR or somebody, if you don't have HR, somebody in upper management approves all terminations. Your leads, your supervisors, your managers, your directors, they can't just be out there on the floor firing whoever they want. That is a super dangerous process, okay? So if somebody wants to fire somebody, they need to go to this one person designated in your organization. This helps with consistency. It helps because hopefully, in other words, if we do the same thing for Sally when she did this bad thing, and then also that person should be knowledgeable on employment laws. What the directors, manager, leads, supervisors can do is put people on administrative leave. We used to call that suspension pending investigation. Now we call it administrative leave. And you can pay it or not pay it. That's a company practice that's up to you. But when you do that, it allows you to do an investigation, it allows you to talk to people, and of course, it allows you to get their final check ready, which, by the way, state of Nevada says you have to pay them immediately upon fire. Yes, there is a 72-hour grace period. I encourage people not to use that. When you fire somebody, have check in hand with all the appropriate forms, the unemployment flyer, their COBRA notice, their 401k notice, get a change of address, and send them on their way. You do not get their keys, all that. You do not want them coming back on your property. So the other thing I want to talk about is people ask me all the time, do I tell them why I'm firing them? Well, I use this analogy. You know, if you have a significant other or, a spouse, do you want them to tell you why they're firing you? People want to know what happened, even if they don't agree with you. Otherwise, they torture themselves. Like, was it this? Was it that? And then they march themselves down because they figure if you didn't tell them, you must be firing them for something illegal. So yes, you tell them. You tell them the behavior that they did or behaviors, and you tell them the impact it's had on the organization. What you don't tell them, and this is key, write this one down, is your assumptions, your judgments, your conclusions, or opinions about them as a person. Do not say those, because when you're in front of an attorney, they say, well, what makes you the expert on that assumption, judgment, a conclusion, or opinion? Stay with just the facts, Jack. State the behavior and the impact. All right, that has to do with termination. And one last thing on termination. If you believe somebody is going to go ballistic, is going to have a workplace violence issue, you have any inclination of that, take mitigating measures. My kids, it drives them crazy. When there's a workplace violence situation on the news, I'm always standing right in front of the television. I know someone new. Speak up, people. Encourage your employees to tell you that so-and-so has been acting crazy, depressed, talking about their guns, talking about, yes, it's happening too much and I believe in our society, and I believe that if more people talked about it or spoke up, we could eliminate some of these workplace violence issues. All right, so let's talk about quits, voluntary resignation. So let's say you have an employee who isn't doing so well and you're in the middle of a corrective action with them, or maybe you're in the middle of firing them and they say, you know what, I don't want to work here anymore, I've had it. You say, I'm so sorry you feel that way, but I can understand that. And you get your formal resignation paper and you slide it to them and you say, I'm happy to out-process you, I'm sorry to see you go, but if you don't mind signing this resignation form, I'll get your things in order for you. If you don't have it in writing, it's very hard to say you had to quit. And I'm famous for saying, accept the quit. I have clients that say, oh, this person is such a hard employee. And then they call me on the phone and they go, oh, they almost quit, but I talked them into staying. Really? Let them quit. Even if you're going to be, it's common. Even if you're going to be short-staffed, even if you're going to need a warm body again, I don't care. Because that person is going to file a lawsuit, file a workers' comp. Just say, I'm so sorry to see you go. Here, sign this paper. Accept the quit. Write that one down. All right. Lastly, on the voluntary, if you can, do exit interviews. But I want to say, I'm going to go on a tangent here. It's even more important to do stay interviews. That's like a new thing right now, or newer, I should say. Stay interviews are talking to the people that have been with you a long time. Why do you stay here? What makes this a great place to work? Because just talking to them on the way out is not as efficient as talking to them while they're still with you, right? Okay. Number 5. Don't forget to put questions in the chat. Do we have some? Oh, we do. Yay. I love the questions. So create or update all of your job descriptions. Now, even if you're not into dance, I think you'll understand this. People don't have them updated. Sometimes I feel like that's what we do. What do you do for a living? Oh, we update job descriptions for companies. No one likes to do them, but let me tell you something. Job descriptions are to your business. This is like when we took the SATs. As ballet is to dance. They are foundational to your business. You need them for workers' comp claims, ADA claims, FMLA claims. And all of those job descriptions assist healthcare providers with returning people safely to work when they've had an injury or an illness. They help you write really solid behavioral-based interviewing questions based on the defined skills that you need in the job description. They define whether the person is exempt or non-exempt, which people need to know. By the way, it's a legal thing when they are hired, that they're either exempt or non-exempt, exempt from overtime or non-exempt from overtime. And they should contain the essential functions of the job. Those are the tasks, the mandatory requirements, education, experience, knowledge, skill, and ability, physical requirements, and your work environment. We have amazing templates, by the way, for all of the things that we're talking about here today. So just an FYI to you. All people should sign and acknowledge that they received their job description. And one of the good things to do is to update job descriptions at performance review time, to look at them, to have, this helps you stay on top of them. And if you have multiple people in one job class though, and you make a change, you of course have to change and have everybody sign the new job description. But going over them at performance review time tells you a lot about whether the person is still okay with their job, if they're doing things that you don't have, or not doing things you do have. So that's a good time to reevaluate. All right. Number 4. This one is near and dear to my heart. Near and dear to my heart. In fact, I do a class at UNR in their HR certificate program on this, on new hire orientations. Processing, big mistake people will make is not processing and onboarding their new employees effectively. Process people before they start. That means they do their W-4, they sign their I-9, they sign their handbook, they sign their direct deposit. They acknowledge all your policies before they start or on day 1. Because then, once again, remember, we're either building trust or killing trust. We're working with a company right now. She didn't have any of that in place. We are putting all that in place from her. That basically elevates her. That's why she did it. She said, I want people to know that what they do here with me is the real deal. And I know that this is not where I should be at. So fix it for me. So onboarding and processing are 2 different things. Onboarding is your new hire orientation. I like to say how they start is how they go. So if they start with an amazing rock star new hire orientation where you process them first, then you did this brilliant welcome, how you start is how you go. Not having that, listen to this, my favorite analogy, not having a solid new hire onboarding process is like inviting people to your home for a party, not taking their coat and their purse or their belongings, not offering them a drink, not giving them some food to eat, and not telling them whatever activity, dancing, games, out on the patio by the fire pit, special cocktail, whatever it is. It's like opening the door and just standing there. And that's how we onboard people. And we don't understand then why they leave us, because all that does is give them this shaky feeling of, I didn't choose the right place. They don't have their stuff together. So some topics that you could include in your new hire orientation. It could be a half day, a full day, 2 hours, I don't care. Something is a wow introduction. However that is, music, balloons, food, a party. We have a party when people leave, and I didn't make this up. This employer won an award for this. How about we have a party when people start? Everybody come and we have cake, right? Post-COVID, we will figure this out. But anyway, it's a brilliant idea. And then tell about your history, how you came about. Every company has the coolest story of how they came to be. And where are you currently? And what are your goals going forward? And of course, you're going to review key policies and safety and an overview, a really solid overview, things that are important to them for benefits. And you're going to give them a tour and you're going to introduce them. One of my favorite things to do for a new hire is that the owner of a company should come, no matter how big you are, small you are, should come, shake hands, eyeball every single human. When I was at IGT, we had this 8-hour, unbelievable, took me 7 months to write this program for IGT. And I told the VP of HR or the VP of operations, every single orientation you will come in, you will shake people's hands. And that was their favorite part was that the HR or the operations VP came in and said, "Hi, how are you? Where are you from? So glad to have you." It is how you start, how you go, the epitome of that. So that is processing and onboarding new employees effectively and efficiently. All right, number 3, adhering to immigration regulations. And remember, I'm counting down to the biggest mistake employers make with regards to their employees. This one's number 3 because in my entire career, I have yet to go into a company who has their I-9s completed properly. Why does that matter, you say? Well, it matters because for technical errors, just even one error on a form, if they come in and audit you, the fines are anywhere from $230 per I-9 not completed properly to $2,292. How did they come up with those numbers? I don't know, but those are their numbers. And you heard me just say, I have never gone into an employer or worked in corporate America that had their I-9s perfect. Never once in all my years of HR. The other thing is, if an employer is hiring or retaining employees that are illegal, there is not only potential prison time, there is also fines for unauthorized employees from $573 to $22,927 per unauthorized employee. So have your people trained on how to complete I-9s and have 2 people review every I-9. I like to have the entire new hire packet, the employee file, done by HR or the office manager, whoever it is, and then given to the business owner, the VP of operations, the VP of administration, so that you can look through everything. Their pay's right, they've signed all the documents, and their I-9 is correct. Also, do an annual audit, self-audit on your I-9s. And if you need training on this or anything else in here, of course, we are happy to provide that. And as I mentioned earlier, your I-9s need to be kept separated from everything else in the human resource file. Okay, fire hose. We're down to the last 2. Provide leadership training to your management team. Remember, these are the top 10 mistakes that I see over all my years of business owners make with regards to their humans. They do not provide nuts and bolts leadership training to their people and unite them a leader, and then you don't train them on how to be a leader and how to terminate somebody and how to interview somebody and what are the legal issues and how do I do performance reviews and how do I even lead these people? You don't do that, and they're never going to tell you that they don't know how. And all of a sudden you're in an issue with this person and you're like, you're kidding me, you didn't know we had to do that? No, I had no idea. So you need to train your leadership team. Now, one of the areas where leadership teams really have issues because they're not trained is writing people up, doing corrective actions. They're a mess. Even trained leaders, business owners, an absolute mess. Improper words, threats. They make I statements. They don't get the specifics of the situation. They use slang words. So you really need to make sure your management's trained on how to do corrective actions. And oh, by the way, on that note, just an aside, doesn't have to do with leadership training, but all corrective actions should be signed, even the verbal. I have changed our form years and years ago. I don't have verbal on my corrective action. I have initial notice because the verbal confuses the manager, the verbal confuses the people, and I know you've all been there on that one. Okay, leadership training, nuts and bolts leadership training, and of course the kinds of things that Kevin talks about as well, but the nuts and bolts is the foundation. You've got to make sure your foundation is not cracked. Okay. Drum roll, please. 10 out of 10 employers, we're on number 1 now, 10 out of 10 clients, corporate America, the 3 director level jobs I had in this town, do not have a solid recruiting and selection process that they follow. Some of them have a recruiting selection process when we do assessments, but their people are not following it. This is the biggest change you can make right now, today, in your company. It blows my mind because our most expensive expense on our profit and loss is payroll. And our most important assets are employees. Because if we didn't have employees, we could not make the product or service that we do. And yet, we hire warm bodies. We don't even have complete employment applications. We don't have good interviewing questions. And then we wonder why we're sued, why we can't keep them, why they can't do the job we hired them to do. It is not rocket science, people. It's because you don't have a good process for recruiting. So let's talk about what that looks like, and then we're going to take questions. All right. Got to do a job analysis to write good job descriptions, to write sexy job postings. Sexy job postings are not posting the job description in an ad. That gives them the answers to the test before the test. People are savvy interviewers. Also, you want to have predetermined behavioral-based questions, which behavioral-based questions are, tell me about a time in the past you have done this. Not hypothetical. What would you do if? They can only guess or say exactly what you want to hear in the hypotheticals. And they don't know what they don't know. So hypothetical tells you nothing. Behavioral-based interviewing questions based on your job description per job. You should have a structured interview sheet per job. And all candidates should go through the same process, which includes before they get hired. Do you know how many times I hear this? When do you have people complete an employment application? Oh yeah, we do that. After they're hired, we give them an employment app. What? Employment apps say the reasons for leaving. They're a legal document. They say desired salary. They say whether or not the person has a valid driver's license, if that's important to you. They talk about their job stability. Employment apps, I can look at one and go, no, thank you, not going to work. Okay, so as far as a process, you write a sexy ad, you get resumes in, you put them on a resume grid. Anybody qualified, you send an employment application to them. They return that to you, and then you do a phone screening, like a pre-screening with the person, see if there's a match there, then do a first interview with HR, then do a second interview if they make it through that with the manager or the supervisor, and then maybe a third interview if that's appropriate with your owners. People ask me all the time, well, how long should the interview be? Well, an entry level, you might spend an hour to an hour and a half with all those people. If it's a management level person, they spend, with my staff alone, if we're doing recruiting, they don't get out of us without 3 hours to 4 hours before I even give them to my client. And then that person should spend an hour or two. If people are making a 5-year commitment, a 10-year commitment, 4 hours is really not a lot of time. Okay, so after you do the pre-screen, the first interview, the second interview, do skill testing, reference checking, drug testing, background investigations, and do a formal offer letter, even for your entry-level folks. That tells them when they're going to start, what the benefits are, what their pay is, if they're exempt or non-exempt, has an at-will statement on it. And then lastly, with regards to your solid selection process, make sure your employees know what questions not to ask in an interview. And one of the main ways around that is if you have to, today one of your people is doing an interview, this is what I say, if it's not job related, don't ask it. Oh, and if you're asking yourself if it's job related, it's probably not job related. All right. Before we do questions, let's get let's get our answers to our pretest really quick. Now I'm just going to go through them because we have 12 questions and I want to make sure that I get to them. And maybe when we do these answers, you'll have questions from here. So FMLA applies to employers that have 50 more employees. True. 2, HR procedures are A, important to have because they help with consistency on handling employee issues. 3, HR files, D, should be kept in lockable file cabinets in a secure location. That is rare that we find that when we ask that question when we do HR assessments. When out processing, employees and employers should do A, B, and C, all of the above D. Written job descriptions, A, assist companies with writing accurate interviewing questions that are based on defined skills needed for a job. 6, the sole purpose of new hire orientation is to communicate company policy and hand out new hire forms as they relate to the business. False. It's to create a solid welcome and a feeling of like, yeah, I made a good decision. The new hire forms should be done prior to new hire orientation. Regarding immigration regulations in the Form I-9 number 7B, discriminatory for an employer to require an employee to show more documents than are necessary for the purpose of completing the I-9. And if you're doing that, it's discriminatory. If you're saying I need a passport, a driver's license, social, that's discriminatory. That's a separate lawsuit. So don't be doing that. And then number 8, when an employee receives a written verbal corrective action, there is no need to get their signature. False, or it didn't happen. They must sign or it didn't happen. One of the most effective types of interviewing questions are C, behavioral-based interviewing questions. And number 10, a person who is classified as exempt is exempt from being paid overtime. They are also exempt from having to take breaks and lunches. Oh, by the way, so number 10 is true. Okay, so what do we got in the chat, Tay? Let's go through our questions. Hopefully that wasn't too fast, and then I just have a few closing words.
All right, so our first question looks like it's an FMLA question. If you have multiple locations, is it just the home location that triggers the 75-mile requirement?
No. 75-mile radius between places. In other words, so 50 employees, so if you have a place in Sacramento and a place in San Francisco, that is more than 75 miles. So you don't have to lump those two together to become 50. Has nothing to do with your home base. Okay.
All right, next question. Do you have to be consistent with administrative leave on paid or non-paid?
Do you have to be consistent with I might have to look, hold on.
Consistent with whether you pay or don't pay administrative leave?
Oh, yes. Yes. Answer is yes. 100%. You either do it or you don't do it.
All right, next we got, can fringe benefits be based on average hours worked for non-exempt employees or remote versus office-based staff?
What are fringe benefits? Whoever asked that question. I mean, I would just, okay, it's probably outside of medical, dental, vision is what you're saying.
She said a gym membership.
Based on average hours worked for non-exempt employees. Yes, listen, PTO, things that aren't required by law, you can decide whatever rules you want as long as you're consistent. And, if it's remote or office-based, I would not delineate. That wouldn't make sense. If you want to do it on hours worked, yes, but remote or office, that is not a good separation of you get this, but you don't. I wouldn't do that.
All right, another FMLA question.
Wait, the other thing I want to say is if you're going to offer a gym membership, I would do it for all full-time employees. I would do full-time or part-time because really, typically those aren't very expensive. And if people go to the gym, that benefits you as the employer. So I had to keep going on that one. Okay, next.
All right, another FMLA.
Yeah.
Where is the home office if a company is 100% virtual?
Well, that's a great question. So that would be, most people aren't going to be 100% virtual. So again, home office doesn't matter. Do you have 50 employees within a 75-mile radius? That's a difficult one though. Like I haven't seen that, so you can't quote me on that one. That's interesting. But it would be, I'm thinking, my educated guess is, do you have 50 employees within a 75-mile radius in all their little homes? Yep. And that is part-time, full-time. And that includes temporary people as well, like people that work for agency.
All right, next.
I see it. Do I agree that most owners? Yes. So, sorry, I got all excited about that. Do I agree that most owners need leadership training more than anyone else? Listen, here's what I have to say. Business owners have a craft, like I did. I'm really good at HR, so I started an HR company, right? And in my case, I'm a leadership person, so the leadership probably doesn't apply to me, but people have their practice, they're doctors, they're dentists or whatever, and they open a business and they have no clue how to run their business, 100%. And the other thing is they tell me, come in, do your 6-class leadership workshop series for my people. Oh, but I won't be there. I'm like, what? How are you going to enforce and understand and agree with what I'm training your people to do? That's silliness. If you have any leadership training, you're the business owner, go to the training. Please go to the training. And yes, you need it.
All right. Can a part-time employee ever be exempt?
Yeah. But they have to meet the criteria for it. And one of the criteria is a pay factor. They have to make this amount of money. So that typically doesn't happen, mainly because of the salary criteria. Does that make sense? Hopefully.
All right, looks like maybe one more question. Will you talk about what HR changes will happen as we have more people wanting to work from home?
I don't have a crystal ball. There are so many issues with people wanting to work from home. One of the things is they need to be covered by workers' comp, so their office, because I have a gal that works in Elko, I had a person that worked from London. They have to be covered, their address, you need to cover them wherever they're at for workers' comp. The other thing is that with remote workers, communication becomes all that more important. We already, and I'm sorry to say this word, we already suck at communication as leaders in an organization because we don't have time. We don't have time to not have time. But we all do that. And your remote workers, they need really solid expectations. I've been doing remote work with my people for a very long time. You really need to sit down and navigate and create a plan. Regular huddles are imperative so people see your face, and they can't just come on and not have their video on and not have their sound on. It has to be conversations. It's a lot harder to have conversations with people when they're remote. It's not impossible. I told you I had a gal work for me in London. She worked here for me for 7 years and then went over there and worked for me for 3. So it's possible, but you have to set up a really good plan. Any other questions, Tay?
Looks like that's all of them.
What about background checks?
What about them?
Are you able to do them if they might have a felony?
Well, you can't, if you do it for one, you got to do it for all. There's no going, oh, I think you have a felony, so I'm going to have you do it, but not everybody else. HR is all about consistency. If you do it for one, you got to do it for all. And they're expensive. And we run them, by the way, we're involved with background check company. And so if that's something you need, I mean, HRC, I have to do a quick plug for my company here real fast. We are full service. So we're like HR in a box. So whatever piece of us you need, we could help you.
But the other thing too, on that note, Karyn, you know, with that question about, can you ask about a felony even? You can't even ask about a felony. So how would you know? Yeah, how would you know if you're not asking? I mean, that's a question that's an illegal question, really. I mean, it's not a smart one to ask. So I would completely stay away from it.
Okay, so I'm going to just disagree with you, Dee Dee, because in Nevada, we can still ask that question. Have you ever been convicted of a misdemeanor? Have you ever been convicted of a crime? Maybe you're in California. California, you can't ask that anymore. But in Nevada, we can still ask it.
But it does open the door to discriminatory behavior, because then you've got to determine or tell and explain why you're not going to hire this person. So I mean, you don't have to stay away from, really.
You don't have to tell them that. But what I will agree with you on there is that, let's say somebody has a DUI and you just say, well, I don't hire people with DUIs, and it's not job related. They're not driving a car. That could be considered discriminatory.
Exactly.
Felons and misdemeanors are not in any race, color, religion, national origin, gender, etc. protected class. However, there could be a disparate impact. So you just need to be careful that you aren't just making a blanket thing like, I'm not going to hire people if they have ... But if you are hiring a controller and they have falsified, what is that called? Falsified checks. Oh, it's such the weird.
Dazzling.
Okay, yeah, there's a different word for it. But anyways, if they've embezzled, that's a BFOQ, bona fide occupational qualification. You absolutely can say that person's not qualified because of that. So
You have to tell them that you're running a background check?
yes, and your employment application should say that. And then when they fill out the form to have a background check, they sign that they're having that. Yes.
Can you ask someone if they can be bonded?
Yes. But I mean, they're going to say yes.
If it's a bona fide occupational qualification, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and people who are bonding people usually have people going into homes. And once again, you can't bond this person and not ask that other person to be bonded. It's all about consistency. What else? Anything else? I know we're I made it, people. I have a minute. Okay. In closing, yay me. So in closing, I want to thank you all for being on here today. I'll remind you that if you want a complimentary session with us, we're happy to do that with you. And it's imperative. My closing thoughts are, yes, it's imperative that you have a proper foundation to your company with regards to your nuts and bolts HR functions, but it's about connection and conversation that really is going to keep you out of legal hot water. And I want to just say, as leaders, we need to bring people, especially in this day and time, we need to bring people together more often. We need to define our expectations better more often. We need to be as transparent as we can more often. And most importantly, we need to have conversations, not work-related and work-related conversations, to get to know our people more often. Thank you so much for your time today. Have a wonderful rest of your week, and thanks for listening.